Hi, in this video I'd like to talk about audio devices such as onboard audio and sound cards. I'd also like to talk about the software that can go along with the drivers if you happen to install them, such as the Realtek Audio Console right here. We'll go over that in just a moment. We're also going to talk about speakers and how some of them are made differently, and the fact that some speakers have built-in equalizer and environment profiles, which probably wouldn't work very well together alongside enabling some of these. I don't know, maybe it would be kind of neat. I haven't personally tried. But I would suggest leaving one flat and using the other as opposed to trying to use them together. But again, experiment. Maybe it would be cool. That is, of course, if your speakers happen to have that function. In addition to talking about speakers and sound cards and onboard audio, we are going to go over this software here and talk about what each one of these do and why you would want to enable them, as you can see that I have here. So let's get on with the video. We'll be dealing with onboard audio, okay? And if I talk about sound cards, or I mention sound cards, I'm still ultimately thinking and talking about audio out. You know, whether it's onboard audio or a sound card, I might switch back and forth between the two, but that's pretty much what we're getting at, okay? One of the things we will not be covering at this time are USB sound cards, like this one, or something a little bit more advanced like this one, or DACs, such as this, these, and the back side of one here. So we won't be covering those things. I had started doing this video initially, and I had screwed up somehow. I'm not sure what I'd done. Because I found myself annoyed, I decided I would just pull up a game for a few minutes, maybe talk a little bit, and get back to the video that I was originally planning on making. Because what I was trying to do initially was talk about sound cards, because I'm talking about audio, right? And it just seemed to me that it made sense to talk about sound cards and, of course, onboard audio, seeing as how we're going to be talking about sound card software, right? Yeah. So, essentially, I had done the whole video, like a good portion of what I was trying to say I had already done, to find out that the video didn't record, or it could have been just the way I had set up OBS initially, I think, but it didn't record nonetheless, point being, right? So here we are, doing a little race, we can talk about it. Get out the way, get out the way. Oh, so what I was originally saying was how what got me into audio initially was that I used to find myself to be a bit of an audiophile. And at one point in my life, I had a really big system, like a stereo system with multiple racks on it, big speakers. I was probably very annoying to my neighbors, and you know, one of those things where you kind of grow out of it, because having loud, bassy speakers all the time is can be a bit much, you know. Coming from a place of really enjoying my audio and having good speakers and good sound systems and so on, when I had switched from having stereo systems to computers, it was a drastic difference, and I was always trying to find, well, that sound, that, you know, something that was good. And over time, I learned about sound cards and how, at that point in time, they were better to have for multiple reasons. One, you would get more sound output, such as these here. You'll see one is PCI and the other two are PCIe. So you have 7.1 and 5.1 sound cards here. When I mention outputs, I'm talking about the green port your line out or your audio out, or if you have a 5.1 or 7.1 with multiple outputs, right? Otherwise, I'm specifically talking about jacks at the back of the motherboard or the sound card, such as these here with your pink mic in, green line out or audio out, and blue line in, which is how it was originally. You had output sound out, front speakers. You had the blue jack, which was a line in, and you had a pink jack, which was your mic. And for the most part, they've kind of stuck with those colors, as you see here with your basic onboard audio having 3 ports. And this one here is a 5.1 audio device. Green again is your audio out, pink mic in, blue line out. The yellow one, I believe, might be bass out. The black one is your center channel, and the gray one is your rear, right, and left audio out. Now, that being said, the black and the orange could be swapped. Either which way, that's pretty much what you're looking at there. Okay? There's some gaming motherboards where they're slightly different. For example, on mine, the main audio out for front speakers is red. Back in the day when I was gaming on older systems, one of the things that we used to do was put our background to a black image without any color to render or an image to render, right? Now, whether or not this really made any difference, I don't really know. It could have just been a placebo effect, to give the CPU a little bit of a break, at least graphically. We would put our background to black. Now, if you loaded up a game, you would be over that wallpaper anyhow, so maybe it really was irrelevant. Not all onboard graphics were able to even game, to be honest with you. The only game that I was able to load up on an onboard graphics GPU was Unreal, and that was the only game that ever played on onboard graphics. I definitely had to, get a PCI graphics card at first, and then I upgraded from a PCI graphics card to an AGP graphics card. And, an AGP then turned into the PCI Express, PCIe, right? So that gives you just an idea of the timeline, all right? Now, why I'm talking about that is because I mentioned taking the stress off of the CPU. Well, that was the same thing with sound cards. The idea of the sound card was, one, you would get extra ports that you wouldn't normally get with the onboard sound card, or onboard sound, right? And you would also get enhancements. You would get sound enhancements with like the software that would come along with it, with the Creative Sound Blaster Live sound card. So you would get better sound quality, you would get more sound ports, you would also have the ability to use EAX, and there was, like software to control, what you could use, okay? So ultimately, having a sound card was just better for those purposes, but it also took the pressure off of the CPU to have to use cycles to produce sound, right? So for gaming purposes, having a sound card was better for multiple reasons. Now, how much resources the audio was really pulling from a CPU, I couldn't even tell you. The point in what I'm getting across is not only were sound cards useful for sound quality, software, and potentially taking some of the weight off of the CPU, but moreover, to the whole point of this, is that sound cards got me into learning more about, sound quality and things like that. And at one point, I used to have a surround sound speaker system. I used to have a surround sound speaker system, and it sounded amazing, especially for gaming. I had gotten so used to having really nice sound and being surrounded with like spatial audio and things like that, and gaming with multiple speakers like around me, that when I switched to the speakers that I have now, it felt like a major downgrade. However, with virtual surround, for headphones and things like that, I began to get kind of used to it, and now I just use the stereo speakers that I've got with the bass box. But if I could, I would definitely, you know, get another 5.1 or 7.1 surround system for sure. And let's get on with the rest of the video. Okay, since we're talking about sound cards and audio software, we should also talk about speakers. Now, that being said, I'm going to show you the speakers that I'm currently using, and I'm going to also talk about what would be slightly better than these, and I'll explain why that is. I'm also going to show you what my girlfriend's using on her computer and what's on my kid's computer, and also why these speaker configurations and setups matter. Okay, that would also include headphones. So we're going to start off with these speakers here on my setup, and I'm sorry about the wiggle of the camera as I'm using a phone here. So these are the Logitech Z625 gaming speakers. All right, and on this particular speaker over here, it only has a bass volume, control. Over here is the volume. The volume I have it set about 50, around 50 or so. Looks to be about halfway, maybe just slightly over halfway. And then on the Windows side is where I tend to do the majority of the controlling of the audio, the volume I mean. Now, the reason why I'm pointing out the bass knob here is because these particular speakers only have mid-range and like lows within the drivers of these speakers. There are no tweeter drivers here in these speakers. And if there are, and I'm wrong, then they're really small and very insignificant and don't really produce many highs. You get a lot of lows and mids out of these speakers. And they're also connected to a bass box. And I'll show you the bass box in a minute. But yeah, up in here, I'm fairly certain that there is no tweeter behind here. And if there is, the drivers are incredibly weak. But I'm almost certain that there's not. I feel like what we're really getting is mostly mids and some highs out of here, and the rest of the lows out of the bass box. Now I'll show you the bass box right now. This is the bass box for that speaker setup, and as you see, it's somewhat small. Now, speaking of the fact that these don't have very much high range, and I don't believe that there's any tweeters in these at all, and if so, those tweeter drivers are incredibly small. I didn't mention how I have the bass knob turned just slightly over. If I turn it up this way, I will get a little bit more high end. Not much, but a little bit more. However, that also impacts the bass box. The bass box doesn't have its own individual volume and level knob on it like my old setup did. So the reason why this is turned slightly more towards the bassy as opposed to 50-50 is because I needed to get a little bit more bass out of the bass box. The woofer, the subwoofer, if I were to turn this that way, I would get a little bit more high end, but that wouldn't compensate for the fact that there's a lack of tweeter in here, right? The better speakers that I would use, which would be an upgrade to these, would be the Klipsch 2.1 Pro Media THX gaming speakers. Those would be far better than these, and I'll show you a photo of those because those have actual tweeter speakers in them along with the mid-range and of course the bass box. They're just far better than these are. Alright, now let's go take a look at my girlfriend's speakers. So in the living room is my girlfriend's setup, and as you can see by the boxes down there, it's primarily a Corsair setup. Corsair case, power supply, fans, cooler, drives, peripherals, headset, like nearly everything sans monitors is Corsair. As you see here, this Corsair bass box is far bigger than the bass box that's in my room now, and it wouldn't fit. So that was one of the reasons why we ended up swapping speakers around, because I had upgraded her speakers, which are these. And you see here, Corsair on the bass box, right? I'll show you the bookshelf speakers now. And as you see here, these have an actual tweeter driver, right? Along with the other speaker and the driver down below. Okay, so these bookshelf speakers are much closer to what the Klipsch 2.1 speakers are like. Okay, so those are the Corsair speakers, and these speakers are the SP2500s, Corsair SP2500s, and they don't sell them anymore, unfortunately. Now, the reason why I'm pointing out the speakers is because these particular speakers come with a control box, which is similar to the speakers that I was showing you in my room, how they had a volume and a bass box, right? A bass knob, I mean, for the bass box and the mids and the lows, right? Well, this does volume, but it also can do, control the bass or the treble from here, in addition to volume. But it also has filters on it, like reverb and echo and various equalizers based on the kind of music you might be listening to, right? So right now, I believe this controller is set to flat because the software that we're using on Windows. So the same thing goes with these headphones. These are the Corsair Void Pro RGB. Now, these in the Corsair software have the ability to run, virtual surround and also equalizers. When those are plugged in and running, they're not using the sound card that's in the back of the machine, right? So that software that goes with that sound card will not control those headphones. Similar to here. Now, the difference is, though, that this is actually connected in the back of the machine to the sound card. So just like the other speakers I was showing you that I had the volume set to about 50, and then on the Windows side I had more control over the sound of the volumes, right? This has more functionality. Like I said, there's filters and other things in there with the multiple buttons and the options. It's off now, or is it? No, it's actually not off. Okay, so yeah, this one is currently on the volume window. So that's how these speakers run. Now we're going to go take a quick peek at my kids' speakers. Alright, so now we're at my kid's computer setup, and we can take a look at her speakers. And as you can tell, she absolutely loves pink and cats and animals. And I do have a video about this build coming soon. We can get back to that later. Alright, so let's get to her speakers. So one of the cool things about these is, even though they're not connected to a subwoofer, there is a jack in the back to connect to a bass box. They still produce a really decent low bassy sound. And also, even though there's no individual tweeter, the high ends come out nice. There's a really good sound that comes from these speakers here. Anyhow, in addition to that, on the side, there's a rocker here for volume, but there's also a button that gives you like a built-in equalizer for a variety of sounds, and one of which is like gaming, music. Anyways, the point being is, because similar to the Corsair speakers that I just pointed out a moment ago on that controller, there's a built-in function for profiles, equalizer profiles. This one has one too. So that almost compensates for the fact that these don't have a tweeter. Well, these have an incredible sound to them. Okay, now that we've talked about our speakers, let's go and look at that software that led us to this entire conversation to begin with. So I actually forgot to mention one thing, is that these speakers can connect to the motherboard via Bluetooth. I also wanted to show you how they are currently connected to the computer via cable, the 3.5 millimeter jack, right? All right, so the reason why I'm mentioning that is because they're connected to the onboard audio. So in that instance, I can use the onboard audio software to make changes. However, if these were connected via Bluetooth, I do not believe that the sound software has the same capabilities in that regard. I do believe that the Realtek Audio Console software mainly has control over speakers that are plugged directly into the onboard audio. However, that being said, if these were connected via Bluetooth, Windows sound settings does have a section where you can enable enhancements of a different variety, such as Loudness Equalization and things like that, but it wouldn't be quite the same as what you're given via the Realtek Audio Console. Okay, so we're back now from looking at some speakers, and as you can see, the reasoning behind showing you the speakers was I didn't think that if I was going to show you the software that does what EAX used to do on sound cards, would make sense to not include the fact that speakers can also do that sometimes. So you, one, don't necessarily need to use this software if your speakers have independent profiles, although they're limited, and they also don't work with EAX really, right? Secondly, as I had mentioned, is that running them side by side may or may not have good experience or outcome. So that was the reasoning for showing the speakers, and also talking about, well, sound quality, and how just because you get gaming speakers doesn't necessarily mean that they might not be the best quality for music or other things, because while these Logitech speakers that I showed you here, the Z625 Z gaming speakers, they're fine. They're fine for gaming. I wouldn't personally have gone out and bought these if I had known what they sounded like, honestly. The point being is I wanted to point out how different speakers sometimes have different functions, and they may or may not play well with the software we're about to look at, okay? And what brought me to the software to begin with, which is one of the reasons why I was originally doing this video, is because I had originally set up my speakers to sound a certain way, updated Windows 10 to 11, and my sounds were reset, and that's because this console is somewhat connected to the Windows sound controls as well. Yeah, so when you make these changes, if you happen to do it yourself, you might want to keep that in mind, that you may need to check up on them, because apparently they get changed and you don't even know it, because, you know, fuck you, that's why, apparently. Yeah, so let's get on to the software, which, if you hung out this long, I think this has gone in 20 minutes, half an hour or so, which was not intended when I first set out to do this video, but I don't do really short videos anyhow. Like, it's the way I think about things. It's like, okay, I want to talk about audio software, but then audio software leads me to the component that drives that software, the sound card or the onboard audio. And then, of course, that leads me to the output, which then goes to your speakers, which then gets me talking about speakers. So what could have been maybe a 4 or 5 minute video of, hey, go to this, maybe not even 4 or 5 minutes, it could have been a 2-minute video perhaps. Hey, go to this software here, click these buttons, and you're good to go. And you know what, I could probably cut this down and do a real quick one just for the sake of it after the fact, but the bottom line is, it's how I go about thinking and doing things. The point I'm trying to get across is one thing led to another, which ended up being a much bigger video because I wanted to cover all of the bases. Seemed important to me. Alright, so let's get on to the software now. And if you hung out this long, I appreciate it. And these are all set to default off, or if you want to talk about the equalizer, they're set to flat. Okay. Now, moving over to the speakers. You have a speaker configuration, which is stereo, quadraphonic, 5.1 or 7.1, so surround sound, or just 4. 5.1. Sometimes in this case, your center or your bass box could be swapped on the back of the ports here, depending on the motherboard or configuration. See right here, swap center subwoofer output. Okay. Also 7.1 similar. Alright. Moving on to the next panel. We have the sound effects, and in here, initially, when Windows reset my sounds, loudness equalization was off. This was set to none, and this was also set to none or flat. So the way I usually keep it is loudness equalization enabled. I set the environment to living room, and I set the equalizer to live. Room correction is meant for surround sound speakers and is designed to be set up in such a way of where the speakers are set in relation to where you are sitting, how far off to the side of the room, how close to they are in front of you, and things like that. And as you see here, it's disabled because I'm only using 2 speakers. The default format is set here for your bitrate quality. Okay, and this shows you your back panel ports. So that's what those panels do, and similar for here, except again I'm not using this connector. Alright. Now what I'd like to do is show you the difference of what it sounds like with loudness equalization on and off, and also the differences in the sounds when these environments and equalizers are enabled. And that's what brings me, talking about the loudness equalization brings me to that point, is that one of the things that I had clued in on was that while watching things on like YouTube or whatever, that it wasn't as loud as it used to be, and I typically don't have my main volume set very high, like around 30 to 50 or so, somewhere in there, depending on what I'm doing, and also depending on whether or not the recording that I'm listening to wasn't boosted previously. Let's say it's just a low, quiet recording, which requires me to turn the volume up, is what I'm getting at there. So roughly between 30 and 50 is where I tend to leave it, and then I have the main speakers set to 50%, like the volume on the speaker itself. We're probably going to have to switch to the camera on my phone and record the sound coming through my speakers so that you can hear what I can hear. On the speakers tab is where we are. You have virtual surround, which you might consider to use if you had headphones plugged into your speakers. Also don't know how it sounds because I haven't actually used it. But my headphones aren't plugged into the back panel. The headphones that I use are actually monitor out. They're plugged into the back of the mic. So that's what I hear, is what comes through the mic. And my gaming headphones, these are my JBL Harman Kardon. Anyways, back to the speaker software. So you have the speaker configuration, which, as we said, whether it's stereo sound or surround sound or whatever. You also have the virtual surround if you're using headphones through speakers or the back port. Let's go back to the sound effects pane. This is where all the changes happen that I have previously set, but once I updated from Windows 10 to Windows 11, a lot of these things were all disabled, and that's because this software is connected to the Windows sound environment as well, and we can look at all that later. This just gives you more of a graphical interface and a little bit more to use. There's a bit more functionality. But most of this stuff is also found in the Windows sound. All right. Now, as you see here, the environment is set to none. Loudness Equalization is off. And all these are like quick shortcuts to different environments. Like you have the sewer pipe, bathroom, an arena, stone room, and an auditorium. Down here, you have the equalizer. And of course, again, shortcuts, right? Pop, live, club, and rock. And keep moving on. I want you to hear the difference now, because one of the bigger things that I had noticed a difference of was that when I was watching videos, it sounded quiet, where right now my volume is set to 30. Okay. Normally, that's really where I have it. I have that set to 30, and I'll have the speaker sound at 50%. Okay. But when I was watching videos on like Hulu or YouTube or whatever, they just sounded quiet. They didn't sound quite the same as they used to. That was what this made a change in. What's coming through your audio output via your desktop speakers or your headphones, you may not be able to hear quite the difference that I can hear coming through my speakers. So I'm using my phone to make the recording to see if I can hopefully be able to relate to you the difference in the sound when I make the changes up here in the software. Okay, and I've chosen to use Gamer's Nexus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little bit from the GN channel here. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
And I'm going to change it from off to on, and I want to see if you can hear the difference come through, okay? And here we go.
Both AMD and Intel stock CPU coolers have been made by Cooler Master for a long time now. AMD's recent revival with its Wraith and Aspire class.
Had you noticed that uplift? Did you notice how there was a little bit of like a poop? It got just a little bit louder. Let's see if what I'll do is I'll turn up my volume here, see if that helps any, because I want you to be able to really hear that change. All right, let's see if that makes a difference. Now we're back to off again.
Both AMD and Intel stock CPU coolers have been made by Cooler Master for a long time now. AMD's recent revival with its Wraith and Aspire.
All right, so quick edit in break here. I'm having trouble during playback hearing the difference that I can hear in real time, in real life, when I click that loudness equalization button, okay? When I'm hearing it back through the recording that I tried to take of it, I can't tell the difference. It almost sounds like there's no difference at all, and it's driving me nuts because I can totally hear the difference when I click that. Because this is driving me so crazy, I decided to try one more time, and I thought I might try something a little bit different. In other words, I took another video of the audio, but I'm going to play it back in VLC, turn up the volume to 125 or whatever the max is, and see if we can hear it together while OBS is recording the playback, because I can absolutely 100% hear a difference, at least this time, in the playback of the video. So let's just see if we can deal with this. And I swear we'll get on with the rest of the video here. I had no idea I was going to run into something like this. And I'm still in the middle of editing the video, so we'll see how much of this makes it in there. See you in a little bit. Alright, now I'm going to play this in VLC. Okay, so I'm in editing mode right now, doing the video, and while playing it back, I am honestly having a hard time noticing the difference. When I'm listening, I absolutely hear a difference in the uplift of the volume. It is currently off. I'm gonna bring it over here to the speaker because it's closest to my hand, and it wouldn't matter which speaker anyhow. They're both coming right at me, but I figure if we get close to the speaker, maybe we can really tell a difference, hopefully. I don't know that it really goes that high, but whatever, we'll see. I mean, that thing says 125 down there, so anyways, just whatever. All right, let's keep moving. All right, and if you're sticking on through this whole video, I appreciate it, and you know, bear with me because there is more to come with the audio enhancements, the equalizer, and the environments, and those things you will absolutely be able to hear the difference with. Okay, here we go.
The XOD and 9900 XOD are part of this. The Ryzen Z2 SoC is the one for handheld, so the predecessor was used in things like the ROG Ally.
Yes, and you could absolutely hear the bass come up. Why I couldn't, I don't know. But you could hear it. You could absolutely hear it. Okay, here we go again.
SoC is the one for handheld, so the predecessor was used in things like the ROG Ally. And
all right, that's what I was trying to show you the whole time. I don't know. Okay, moving on. Holy crap. Wow. Anyways, let's move on. So one of the things you want to have turned on is loudness equalization. You will notice a difference in the sound quality. Well, maybe not. Maybe quality is not quite the word I'm looking for. Clarity, a bit more volume, yes, but it's like more volume without having to have the volume turned up as loud. That's the best way that I can explain it. Okay, let's move on to environments now. As you can see here, and I'm going to just use the quick ones because there's actually a whole lot. And we're not going to go through all of them. You could do that on your own. Now, this is one of the things where I do find, you know, this software to be a little bit more intuitive than like using this kind of drop-down thing that you can find in the Windows sound options, and we'll get to those later. All right, so here we go. I'm going to play this again.
AMD's recent revival with its Wraith and Aspire class stock coolers saw a return to Cooler Master for manufacturing. And as part of our recent trip to Shenzhen and Dongguan, we visited the Cooler Master factories responsible for making those AMD coolers. Today we'll be following an AMD cooler through the process of assembly, and we'll be looking at some of the machines used to manufacture the different parts of an AMD stock cooler. If you've enjoyed our factory tours, the absolute best way to make sure we can continue to afford these expensive...
So as you could tell, a lot of those were just echoey, right? I find that those work best while gaming in certain particular games, and not all of them. That being said, the environment that I tend to use as my quote-unquote default environment is, if what I recall, is room. Now, it's either room or bedroom because there is also a difference in the loudness between room and living room. One of these two is louder. And to be honest with you, I feel like room was louder than living room, which makes no sense to me. Because you would think it would be the other way around, that, you know, living room would be further away from people's bedrooms. I also believe that these environments are much more noticeable, the differences in them, when this is on and when this is not. All right.
International trips is to support us via the GN merch store. You can pick up GPU artifacting shirt designs for $20. GN's critically acclaimed mod mats, now available in both large and medium GPU tears.
So you notice there that it got louder and there was a bit of an echo on room, but it wasn't nearly as bad as these. This stuff is very close to what EAX used to do in games. EAX being enabled used to give like an echo to some like old games like Doom, Duke Nukem, and even some newer games too, you know, like I think there was some racing games or whatever that used the AX. And yeah, so the thing about that is certain games would only use the EAX if you had sound cards or the EAX software installed, but they do have these EAX unified software that's supposed to help make some of these things like work together. All right, so anyways, let's keep going. I'm going to change it from none to the living room this time.
Down sizes, blue tinted beer glasses with gold rims, and 3D laser etched glass statues with GN's anniversary teardown logo.
Okay, so living room. It's like there's like a difference in the quality of the sound. It's a little bit louder, but it doesn't sound quite as loud as room does. But it doesn't have that echo anymore. Okay, watch.
Containing a high detail design with MOSFETs, fans, and VRMs hidden within. Support these tours at store.
So room is louder, but room has echo.
Click the link below. Our factory tours allowed us to see every type
living
of
room is clear,
to make the
but a little bit louder.
Although note that some of the machines were busy making different parts depending on what was going on that
Now, could you tell a difference there when I changed it off?
The stock cooler is incredibly complex. Before even getting to the final assembly line where each part is put together,
it's not as noticeable unless you change from like
service mount technology or SMT lines are needed to make the PCBs for RGB, LED, and fan speed, where the PCB will go through place machines, conveyor belts, through up.
It's funny that none almost sounds identical to living room, but if you're really paying attention, you can tell that there are some differences. For one, living room sounds slightly louder. And again, if loudness equalization is off, I don't feel like these have quite the same impact or the same hit, right? And as you notice with the quick launch ones here, a lot of them are very echoey and stuff, right? Well, that's kind of what a lot of this stuff does. Alley is sort of an echo. Cave, of course, is going to be an echo. Auditorium, concert hall, right? But then you get out into like these, the quarry and the plain, there's in the mountains. It's different. I don't know. Each one has its own thing, and some of them work really well with games. But what I usually keep it on is living room, because there is indeed a difference between living room and none, even though it might not be coming through my speakers to this recording very well. I'm not sure. All right. So that's the difference here.
Filled with lakes of solder and automated optical inspection. Fin stacks have to be stamped by large machinery, but they need tools built first. Fans must be built and assembled. Plastic has to be injected to make the shroud, and heat pipes have to be filled with liquid and sintered powder, then bent to size. Let's start our journey with the aluminum fin stack tooling. Before the fin stack itself can be made, a tool for the fin stack has to be created. Cooler Master has...
Okay, now, Equalizer. You might think that this really only works with music, but it doesn't. I find that what works really well together is having live on alongside living room and loudness equalization. I just find those three to work really well. And if I go into a game and I know that there's a certain sound that I want to come out, then I'll change it to whatever these other ones are. And sometimes I won't even bother. It really depends on the game. Okay. But also, let's see if you better hear the difference between live being off and not.
To support us via the GN merch store. You can pick up GPU artifacting shirt designs for $20. GN's critically acclaimed mod mats, now available in both large and medium GPU teardown sizes, blue tinted beer glasses with gold rims, and 3D laser etched glass statues with GN's anniversary teardown logo, each containing a high detail design.
Now, if you notice, when you have loudness equalization on, living room as your environment, and you set it to live, it sounds the best, at least in my opinion. You might find that a different, combination, or having maybe, environment off with one of these, because it depends on what you're listening to. It could be TV. You may not want that equalizer set to live if you're just watching TV. All right, so this is the Realtek software, And this is the way to get the best sound out of your sound card or onboard audio, depending on what you're using. You want to have these enabled and in use, because otherwise you're missing out on some of the features that your sound card can produce. All right. And what we can do is take a look at the Windows side of things without this, because some people find this stuff to be bloatware or whatever. So yes, there is a way of doing some of these things without having this software installed. I just prefer to have it. Okay, so seeing as how we were looking at this program mostly from my phone for a little while there, I figured we would take a quick moment to look at it without a shaky camera, right? So once again, you got your speaker configuration. Choose what kind of speaker setup you have. Virtual surround if you have headphones connected to the motherboard, the onboard audio, or the front headers, which aren't recommended. I wouldn't connect to the front headers. I'd either go through my speakers or directly to the back of the motherboard. Sound effects. We have already discussed loudness equalization, how the environments work, and how each equalizer works. We already talked about the room correction as well, and what the format is for. Alright, so that's how that works. If you are connecting in the back using your digital output, same idea, instead of the speakers. Okay, very simple stuff. You also have extra options here. Okay, you can pause the video if you need to take a quick look at those. Alright, so that's pretty much this program in a nutshell. We'll take a quick look at the Windows side of things, as well as show you how to download the drivers for your particular hardware, you know, assuming what you may have. Okay, we'll take a look at that as well. Alright, well, now that we're back to OBS, and we already talked about these settings here within the console, we're now going to move over to the Windows side of things. So, now, a few things to note is that one, if you right click on it, you'll go to sound settings, which is this here. Okay? And this is useful for monitoring your mic, for example, as you see here. Okay, go ahead and minimize that in a minute. But if you just click on it regularly, what you'll get is your volume slider. And this is also Windows 11, by the way. Windows 10, it looks slightly different, but close enough. The other thing is if you click here, this gives you the option of selecting what's going to be your output. Right now, I have it set to speakers. Okay, now, these here are the monitors. Further down, you have the ability to set spatial sound. Now, the volume mixer is something else, where you'll see here, this is the system sounds, like your dings and whatever, right? Here's Mozilla, because it's open with YouTube sitting on the page. You have how loud the browser itself is, which is separate from the volume of the main volume, meaning this. Going back to what I was saying, when you click on this and you scroll down further, you hit the mixer. As you can see here, the browser is set to 50%. Could turn it up louder, and then of course the browser, what you're listening to, would come out louder, which actually can be important when you want to make sure that certain things are louder than others or not louder than others. For example, I tend to set the system sounds down pretty low because I don't want them to be loud, especially if I have headphones on. Alright, under more advanced settings is when it brings up this. This is what we were talking about initially. Some of it's all the same. Mono auto, your microphone settings, You could pair input devices or Bluetooth headphones. It's set up through here. My JBLs that I was talking about. This is where you change your output, just like I showed you the quick way over here. Inputs, microphones. Also, the reason why it's set here is because this would be my microphone coming in from the webcam. If you're having issues with your sound outputs, you can use this sometimes to troubleshoot the issues and see if it comes up with any fixes. So here we go, all sound devices. Click on that. It gives you a rundown where your headphones, your speakers, your digital output, which is also the onboard audio, Realtek. It also shows you these. Now, we saw that very same thing over here, you know, when I showed you before. All right. Then it talks about the microphones. On the volume mixer, we had already seen that, but here's a bigger view of it. And here, under more sound settings, you'll find the list of your components that have sound output, what's active and what is not. Deactive is what's not in use. For example, right now my JBL headphones are disconnected, and my monitor headphones that are connected to my mic, those are these right here. These are my speakers out, and under this you can configure similarly to this, where you can configure what kind of speaker setup you have. Over here you can do the same thing when you configure what kind of speakers you have. And then when you do that, you actually go through, click next, and go through the settings, and then you'll have set up the stereo system. Okay, so just for an example, I have stereo speakers. These are satellite speakers connected to a bass box. So then I go through and I click this because they're satellite, as I just mentioned, and then I go through and so on. Okay, so that's for my speakers. We'll talk about headphones in a moment. The other thing that you can do with the speakers here is under the properties, you'll have the spatial sound, advanced, as we've talked about before, where you can set the bit rate, enable audio enhancements, which may be part of the spatial sound. I don't know. Moving on, your levels, which is something we've shown that, you know, over here, the various levels. Okay, so that's the speakers setup, and as you see, it doesn't have everything that the console offers. Go to headphones now. Under there, under properties, we have the enhancements, and these offer bass boost, the virtualization, and the loudness equalization. So some things that are found in here, like this, but you're missing out on these things, which I guess it doesn't matter that much. If this was much more important, the loudness equalization and bass boost and things like that, and the virtualization, you may not actually need some of those environments anyhow, but you have those enhancements. You have spatial sound. The spatial sound also works alongside with the Windows Sonic for headphones. Okay, the volume mixer. And then over here, I'm going to turn on spatial sound, and you'll see a little thing click up here, right here. See how this thing popped up? It does something to the system sound, so then you have another adjustment within the volume mixer. So I'll do it again. Here, and of course here. If you have your headphones plugged into the speakers, which are plugged into the motherboard in the back, or if you're plugged in directly into the back, or if you happen to be using the front ports, which I don't recommend, but that's besides the point at this moment, Sure, you could activate this software because you'd be plugged into it. It might even show headphones here, perhaps. I don't know. I haven't actually plugged the headphones into this. But you have the other options, which I've just shown you. These here, right? What were we just talking about? More sound settings. So, back to what I was saying. Under the volume mixer, when you enable that option for your headphones, the things pop up and change, and it makes some sort of a difference. But I have headphones on right now, and I'm not actively hearing any difference. But I also haven't messed with the sliders or anything, so I'm not certain what this Sonic for headphones actually does. Breaking in with an edit here real quick. As you might notice, this looks like a speaker, right? And I am wearing headphones, but I may have mentioned this earlier in the video at some point. So if I'm reiterating or repeating myself, I apologize, but there's a point to all this. My headphones that I'm wearing currently right now are my monitor headphones, meaning what I speak into my mic, what I hear from the mic goes back to my headphones so that I can hear myself speaking, right? Okay. So I can also hear other things in the house or in the room or whatever. So, you know, if somebody else was making noise nearby close enough that my mic was picking it up, let's say my kid or whatever, right? I would be able to hear that. There might be like a faint echo or like an air gap of some sort that's noticeably distinct in the sound, but I would be able to hear it, right? Okay. So, if my speakers are currently the output, I can hear those speakers hitting the microphone because they're also hitting the room. They're hitting the air. They're coming at me. At this moment, my speakers are set to the output, and headphones are not. Even though I can hear myself through the microphone, they're not the active output source. So that's why these show speakers, and it might also be why I wasn't noticing a difference when I was activating Windows Sonic. I'll show you what I mean here. These are not active, but I'm going to activate them now. And there you go. You see it switched over to headphones. Now, I don't know why I keep hitting that first. Anyways, now let's go here. Go back. We're going to turn Sonic for headphones back on again. And you do see a little bit of something kind of changes there real quickly in the volume mixer. But I'm not actively noticing anything. And I don't know if that's because of the way my mic is being fed to me. My headphones are being fed to me through the mic. I'm not sure if I plug these headphones directly into the computer, if there would be a difference or a noticeable change. But once again, I'm also not actively messing with these sliders right now as well. All right. So a lot of that was basically trying to say that this here is also connected to those other settings that we were working with and looking at under the more sound settings here. Okay. So we're gonna go back to all that right now just to kind of tie it all up. And after looking at this the Windows side of the audio, we'll go look at the drivers and bring this video to a close. So you'll notice that when I click that on, this pops up. There's another volume mixer. But what's interesting is it doesn't show on over here. Okay. So when I go ahead and turn this, so basically it's another way of turning it on. But it doesn't show on over here. That is very strange. You would think that they would just kind of talk to each other. Well, either which way, the point being is this one here, I mean, and it does the same thing either way. It's still on. And maybe I don't know, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Who knows why they don't sync up. but clearly it's still on even though it shows off because you turn it on over here. But we'll shut it off from this one because it can be activated from the other menu. But anyways, the point being is I wanted to show you that there is options for your headphones that you can't find in the speakers from this menu. But if you use the software, you get the same options plus more. So that's why I find the software to be useful. You can also download it for your own motherboard, provided that you have the right audio device. Or maybe if you happen to have a sound card, perhaps it's, let's say you're using a Creator sound card, then in which case you know this already, is that it is very well likely there's some sort of software that's going along with your card, unless you chose not to use that software and you just use the drivers only, and then you have the Windows options. But this here just shows that sometimes downloading the excess software is useful, even if sometimes it might be considered bloat. Anyways, my girlfriend's on hers, she has a very similar Realtek software, but it's from Gigabyte for her motherboard. It's a Gigabyte Aorus Elite or something, I forget. It's a X570 Gigabyte Aorus Wi-Fi, I think. Honestly, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But anyways, so her software looks just like this. Well, no, actually, it doesn't look just like this. It has similar options and even more. And it says Gigabyte over here and a lot of the same options, but slightly different. Okay, now we're on my girlfriend's computer. And as you see here, the Realtek Audio Console shows Gigabyte, and it looks a little bit different. Has pretty much the same thing, most of the same settings, just laid out differently. So on this one you have a main tab with your speaker volume, mute, and other settings. Same thing with the digital output. And under the playback devices, there's the speakers, of course, right? And under speakers is the main volume, just like it shows in mine. This has something interesting that mine doesn't have, which is the smart headphone amp. Then, of course, as we've talked about, the speaker configuration, whether it would be stereo or surround sound, etc. Virtual surround sound option. Room correction. Okay, so nearly all the same things. And then under the Realtek digital output, which I find interesting, is where you'll find the equalizer and the environments, because as you see here, you've got the equalizer and then it shows that, right? And then it shows the environments down here. And of course, loudness equalization. On my computer, for the MSI Realtek software, it shows both on speakers and the Realtek digital output these options, where this one, it only shows it under this and not under the speakers. However, even though that's the case, when these are enabled and in use, they do make a difference, even still. So I don't know how or why that is. It just is. There's also some advanced settings as well. So once again, it's very similar, but has a bit more functions in the user interface. So anyhow, back to the headphones a minute. So for my headphones that I'm using through my mic as my monitor, more than likely I wouldn't want to use these enhancements here, except maybe loudness equalization. The virtualization, that might be neat if I was gaming with these, but I don't see myself gaming with these particular headphones. So in which case I would see what would happen with the other ones. That's why I brought that up. Bass boost, that's kind of neat. I can kind of see how in this particular instance, since I don't use these monitor headphones for gaming, where I wouldn't want those other options like the environments and the echo and things like that. And sorry, I just hit my mic. So yeah, I don't know. I might, after this video, I might mess around with some of these settings just to check them out. But this is something you can see and check out for yourself with your own headphones. And of course your speakers that we've already talked about. But in my case, I don't get as many options as far as on the speakers and under the properties, except for setting this stuff up. Okay, so I was checking things out a little bit here. I think, I'm not 100% certain of this, but I believe that what you would want to do, the headphone virtualization, that's basically the surround virtualization. So I think you could use this along with this. Like you turn this on and you turn on the enhancements. I do believe that the surround virtualization would work with the spatial sound hand in hand together. I think that's how that's supposed to work. But me personally, I think I just prefer having the Realtek audio software. But okay, so now that we've done all that, let's go and look at how we can download the software depending on what motherboard or what situation you might have. Sound card, onboard audio, etc. And then we can wrap this video up. Okay, I just wanted to jump in here real quick for a moment. I've been playing around with this software while gaming, and while messing around with the drop-down options here for the different profiles, I noticed that I wasn't hearing any difference, and also with the equalizer too, while in game. And now I'm on Windows 11, so I don't know if this is like some sort of quirky bug or whatever. Honestly, I don't remember this being an issue before. I feel like I would just set it to the profile and it just worked. It was driver level, so it sort of overrode the audio from the game, sort of ish. They kind of work together hand in hand. It's hard to explain, but it was a noticeable difference. Right, this time I couldn't really hear it, and I didn't understand why. Now I figured it out. For some reason, in order for, and I don't know if it's also the game that I was playing. It was Forza 4, and I was pretty sure that it was straight up full screen, not like borderless window or whatever. And for whatever reason, I had to leave this window open, and like minimized at the very least. But I couldn't set it to what I wanted and like then close it. What I ended up doing was moving this program over to my secondary monitor on the other side, and then game on this monitor. And then, for some reason though, now actually come to think of it, I was able to slide my mouse back and forth between this program and the game without having to do Alt-Tab. So maybe it was running borderless window. I could have sworn it was full screen. And that was really the only game I was testing it with. But the point being is, if you run into an issue where for whatever reason you're not hearing the environments or the echoes or the equalizers or whatever here that you're using while in game, it could be because you're using Windows 11 and you can't set it and then close it. You have to minimize it at the very least, or leave it open on a different, in the background or something. But yeah, leave it like that and then it works. Okay? Yeah. Okay, let's look at the software now. If you have an MSI motherboard like I do, you can start there at the motherboard website. For example, my kid's motherboard is a B550 Tomahawk. Mine is an X570 Tomahawk. So I'm going to go there. And under that, you would go to drivers. Now here's a chipset. But now, that being said, okay, this says AMD chipset software. Sometimes this is not always up to date. So I tend to get my AMD chipset softwares just from AMD. Okay. Now, moving on. The onboard audio drivers, you grab those, download them. Now this one says, oh, so there's a new update. All right. Good. I'm glad. You know what? I'm glad I found out, because that's good to know. Now this says version 609.79. Okay, so curious. Okay. 609.492.1. Oh, okay then. Look at that. Well then, I'm just going to go ahead and grab that right now. Okay, so moving on, you could grab the audio drivers from your motherboard manufacturer website like I just did there. Same difference for my girlfriend's computer with the Gigabyte motherboard, right? We'll go to the Gigabyte website for her motherboard, look for her specific motherboard, okay? Now, that being said, if you wanted the Realtek drivers and, I don't know, for whatever reason, you couldn't find them on the motherboard manufacturer website. Maybe they just weren't well displayed, or who knows, maybe not available. Whatever the case may be, you couldn't find them that way. So put in Realtek Audio software, and you'll see the very first one at the top. You go there. Now, here's the thing. It goes up to Windows 10, but it'll technically work with Windows 11 as well. All right, so you want the top one. Now, this does say driver only, and I guess that's the little caveat. My assumption is that this is just going to update the audio driver in Windows only and not provide any of this, right? And that kind of sucks. But I don't know what it would provide in the Windows software in a sense of what we were just looking at. Maybe there would be more options that aren't there right now. For example, I don't know. I don't know how much more up to date. Well, I mean, I'm going to assume that this driver is more up to date than what I'm currently using, but what I'm currently using has its own software just built in right off the bat, right? Now, that being said, you go over here. This is the software that apparently is like this panel. That's what I'm guessing is it just reintegrates this back into the driver. But it says beta, and I don't know. Maybe that matters. Maybe it doesn't. But at least the date isn't terribly old, you know. This is for a NUC, so that one doesn't apply here. I see that you can, if you have a Dell computer, it looks like you could download it from there. I'm not so sure that I would take it from this place, driver support. I've never even heard of that. Softonic, I have heard of them, but sometimes, you know, downloading stuff on the internet, you know, it could be sketchy. But that's why, you know, I would just go with this one. It wasn't all that long ago that people were talking about it on Reddit. So, yeah. And if you don't like onboard audio, you can always get, you know, a sound card and go with something like that. Now, I haven't had a sound card in a while. I kind of sort of want one in a way, but I probably don't need it. Let's see here. Just wanted to grab up a photo here real quick. So, the one that I am the most familiar with as of like the last time I had played around with one was an Audigy. Like, that shows you how far back I had a card. Like, that was quite a while ago. This was the card I had right here. Point being is, if you have a sound card, you might have software that goes along with it, and you may even have it installed already, so I'm preaching to the choir in that instance. Anyways, what I really wanted to show you was if you needed to grab this software, this is how you would do it. Thank you for watching and sticking through this whole video. We just covered a whole lot of things, from speakers to the driver software to Windows' own audio software. I do have other content coming soon. So I have like a backlog of things that I've been trying to get to for a while now. For example, a couple builds I've done and things like that. So hopefully you enjoy that kind of content. And again, thank you for sticking around and watching the video. A little bit from the GN channel here.
Thanks, Steve.